Destruction doesn't always look like war. It doesn't need sirens or courtroom drama or a front-page headline. No knives, no blood, no yelling. Sometimes the most complete form of destruction happens in perfect silence, not because it's hidden, but because it's calculated. It unfolds so slowly, so deliberately, that by the time it finishes, the other person can't even explain what happened. That's the beauty of it. That's the brilliance Machiavelli understood. You don't destroy someone by going after them. You destroy them by stepping back and letting them destroy themselves. Picture it: someone throws shade in front of others. They want your attention, your reaction, anything to make you look unstable, insecure, emotional. But instead of firing back, you stay quiet. You don't flinch. You don't give them a second of your energy. You simply observe as if what they said didn't even touch the air around you. And that silence, that's where the power lives. Because now they're the only one who looks emotional. You just reframe the entire situation without lifting a finger. This isn't about being passive. Stillness in this context is not weakness, it's strategy. Stillness is what throws them off. It's the one move they can't respond to. They expected a storm and you handed them a breeze. They wanted heat and you gave them cold. You are not reacting. You are watching, waiting, allowing them to perform their unraveling in full view of others while you maintain absolute composure. Machiavelli would have smiled at this tactic, because the moment you react, you let them control the narrative. You enter their frame, and once you're in their frame, you're already losing. Reaction is weakness in the psychological game. Silence, on the other hand, silence is dominance. Let's say someone insults you in front of a group. Don't fire back. Don't crack a smile or raise an eyebrow. Just pause. Let the room fill with the tension they created. Then look at them. Not with fury, not with surprise, just a calm clinical stare. And then you change the subject. Speak to someone else. Ask about their coffee or their weekend plans. Move the room forward like nothing happened. In that moment, you're not just ignoring an insult. You're making a statement. You are not important enough to disrupt my peace. You didn't lose control. You didn't even enter the arena. And everyone watching, even if they can't name it, feels that shift. You didn't give a reaction. You gave them absence. You gave them a vacuum to scream into. And the louder they yell, the more unhinged they look. Because here's the truth: most people don't actually want to destroy you. They want to control how others see you. They want to shape the narrative, to bend the room with their voice. But you can disarm all of that, not by speaking louder, but by going quiet. Still, untouchable. This is where destruction becomes psychological art. You don't confront, you subtract, you remove your energy, your presence, your access. No big announcement, no drama, just a clean surgical removal of your attention. And what's left behind? A person scrambling for an audience that isn't watching anymore. Their energy bounces off empty walls. No one's reacting because you're not playing anymore. Machiavelli knew how to weaponize perception. He let others speak, not to listen, but to expose. Because in the public eye, whoever looks least in control loses. Even if they win the argument, they've lost the room. This is not a quick jab, it's a long game. A war of contrast. You remain steady. They unravel. You speak slowly. They panic. You move on. They obsess. You say nothing, and yet they can't stop saying your name. And that's the most Machiavellian signal of all: not presence, but absence. You become the shadow they chase. The more they talk, the more desperate they sound. And the more desperate they sound, the more they reveal you were never equal players. You were the story. They were just trying to borrow your spotlight. Now here's where you make it brutal. You withdraw access not with bitterness, but with precision. You stop including them in conversations that matter. You don't mention their name. You don't acknowledge their efforts. Not out of cruelty, but because you're building something bigger. You're focused. You're moving forward while they're trapped in yesterday's drama. And every day that passes, you rise a little higher without ever stepping on them. The crowd will notice. Slowly at first, then all at once. People will ask, why are they so obsessed with someone who clearly doesn't care? That seed of doubt is your weapon. Because once doubt enters the room, reputation begins to rot. Their rants become noise. Their attacks become embarrassing, and you become the composed figure in the background, quietly growing more powerful. This isn't just about winning, this is about becoming undeniable. You don't need to explain, you don't need to defend. Your existence becomes the rebuttal. They say you're arrogant, be kind, be generous. They say you're fake, be transparent, consistent, publicly composed. You never deny the accusation, you just outlive it. And that contrast between who they say you are and who you clearly are will do the destruction for you. No argument needed, no pushback required. So when the time comes when the enemy starts to crumble under the weight of their own noise, you don't celebrate. You don't gloat. You don't even acknowledge it. Because their failure was never your goal. Your only goal was clarity, and now the room is clear. You didn't beat them, you revealed them, and now the game has shifted. You've given them silence, and it's starting to echo louder than anything they've ever said. You've withdrawn your energy, and now they're chasing ghosts. But we're not done yet. Because this is just the first layer. Now we go deeper. Into something colder, sharper, something Machiavelli understood better than most. The need for attention isn't power, it's hunger. And hunger makes people careless. It makes them noisy, desperate, transparent. When someone targets you with slander, with subtle jabs, with eye rolls in meetings, or those perfectly crafted half-insults they hope will fly under the radar, it's not about strength, it's about starvation. They're trying to steal your energy, your platform, your name, not because they're strong enough to take it, but because without it, they disappear. So here's what you do next: nothing. You let them talk. You let them spiral. You let them spin their narratives until they start to look obsessive. While they attack your name, you build your name. While they speak about you, you speak about your work. You shift the spotlight from conflict to creation, and now they're chasing your shadow, not your attention. This is how you destroy. Without a single strike, you redefine the stage. They thought it was about proving who's better. But you're not interested in better. You're interested in building. You show up composed, focused, delivering value with precision. You keep your name clean, your tone neutral, and your image intact while they unravel in plain view. That's when the room starts to notice. Not consciously, maybe, but something shifts. People don't talk about them the same way anymore. They don't listen with the same trust. Doubt is a virus, and once planted, it spreads. And all you did was stay still. See, here's the Machiavellian twist: you don't attack them with words. You contrast them with presence. When they say you're arrogant, your kindness disarms them. When they say you're a fraud, your consistency contradicts them. When they say you're unstable, your calmness makes them look like the ones shaking. And the more they try to provoke you, the more obvious it becomes they're not at war with you. They're at war with their own irrelevance. Now here's where you take it a level higher, because not all enemies are loud. Some don't come for you with public accusations or insults. Some wear smiles. They play the long game, the private game. They whisper behind your back. They undermine you subtly, frame your success as suspicious, your work as selfish, your personality as cold. They don't challenge you openly, they chip away at you in the shadows. These enemies are harder to spot and even harder to beat. Because if you try to defend yourself, you look guilty. You validate the rumors just by addressing them. You enter their story, and once you're in, you can't win. But Machiavelli wouldn't waste time with denial. He wouldn't argue in private circles or hold one-on-one clarifying talks to correct misunderstandings. No, he'd do the opposite. He'd become even more visible. This is the third weapon in your arsenal: exposure through contrast. You let your actions speak louder than their whispers. You show up in rooms they only talk about. You outperform every rumor, outclass every insult, outgrow every attempt to frame you as less than what you are. You don't deny the story they're telling you, simply live in a way that contradicts it. You speak clearly in public forums. You perform with excellence in front of the people they whisper to. You stay so grounded, so sharp that their gossip starts to sound like jealousy. And the people they tried to poison with doubt, they begin to wonder, wait, if this person is really that bad, why does everything they do seem so solid? The story doesn't match the reality. And when that happens, the storyteller starts to look like the liar. They counted on your silence, meaning guilt. But your silence was never surrender, it was setup. You let them build the trap. Then you let them fall into it. All because you chose power over pride. You see, the most humiliating thing you can do to someone who wants to destroy you is make them irrelevant. And it's not just public irrelevance, it's existential. They didn't just lose a battle. They lost their identity. Because now everything they said about you has collapsed under the weight of your consistency. And worse, nobody even remembers what the fight was about. All they see is a person growing, succeeding, moving forward. And another person who can't stop talking about them. That's when the real destruction begins. Because people can handle defeat. What they can't handle, what breaks them completely, is being forgotten. You didn't need revenge. You didn't need an audience. You just needed time. And now that time has passed and the dust has settled, your enemy is still there, clinging to a conflict no one cares about. You've exited their story. And that's the final play. You become someone who doesn't even acknowledge their existence. You outgrow the feud. You speak their name less and less until not at all. When others bring them up, you smile faintly and say, "Oh yeah, I haven't thought about them in a while," or "Hope they're doing well." And you say it without venom, without sarcasm, just disinterest. Because nothing cuts deeper than indifference. Nothing reminds someone of their insignificance more than realizing you're already 2 chapters ahead and they didn't make it into the book. That's the last thing they expected. Not war, not defeat, but disappearance. You didn't just win, you vanished. And now they're alone in a battle no one's watching. They wanted a fight, but you gave them silence. They expected resistance, but all they got was the sound of their own voice bouncing back at them. And now they're realizing far too late that silence isn't absence. It's dominance. And the most Machiavellian move of all, making someone believe they were never a threat in the first place. This is where destruction becomes psychological art. You're no longer reacting to them. You're no longer even walking the same path. You've made a pivot not just in strategy, but in posture. And that posture says there was never a competition. I was never playing the same game. But we're not done yet, because not all enemies scream. Some imitate. Some enemies won't attack you with insults. They won't gossip or slander or try to bring you down. Instead, they'll try to be you. Quietly, steadily. They'll mimic your tone, your branding, your moves. They'll try to align themselves with your network. They'll show up at the same events, post the same type of content, mirror your language. They don't want to fight you, they want to replace you. And most people panic when this happens. They feel copied, threatened, like their identity is being stolen in real time. But Machiavelli wouldn't be threatened, he'd be flattered. Because when someone imitates you, they've already admitted they can't create something better. They're not building their own path, they're walking in your footsteps. And the answer to that, you don't stop walking, you sprint. You evolve so quickly they can't keep up. You shift lanes, shift tone, shift tactics just fast enough that by the time they finish copying one version of you, you've already become someone else. You're not just staying ahead, you're becoming uncatchable. This is high-level Machiavellianism. You're not destroying them by confrontation, you're destroying them with acceleration. They're stuck in replication, you're living in reinvention. And the deeper realization is this: someone who copies you is already admitting they've lost. They're reacting to your existence. Every post, every move they make is shaped by a desire to compete a race you never joined. And you don't have to discredit them. Time will do that for you. Because when your engine is original and theirs is an echo, they eventually run out of fuel. So what do? You keep building. You diversify your output. You sharpen your uniqueness. You elevate your voice and your results until they can no longer keep up. You leave no version of yourself behind long enough for them to replicate. And most importantly, you never mention them. Not in interviews, not in meetings, not in private. Because the moment you acknowledge them, you legitimize the illusion of competition. But if you ignore them, you reinforce the truth: there was never a race. Now we move into even more dangerous terrain: the enemy who thinks they're better than you. The one who underestimates you. The one who looks down on you with quiet arrogance, convinced they are untouchable. These enemies are the easiest to destroy, not with attacks, but with progress. You don't argue with them. You don't try to prove them wrong. You listen, you observe, you let them talk while believing they've already won. And then you build, you create, you grow, not to prove a point, but because that's just what you do. And slowly it starts to show. People who once turned to them now turn to you. Rooms that used to echo with their name now begin to whisper yours. And they feel it, that shift in attention, in influence, in energy. They collapse not because you knock them down, but because they can't function without applause. Their ego begins to starve. Their identity, once propped up by admiration and dominance, begins to rot in the silence of being overlooked. And the most brutal part, you never said a word. You never launched a campaign. You never even mentioned their name. You just became undeniable. You built a better throne next to theirs, and people started turning their heads. You didn't steal their crown, you made it irrelevant. This is the elegance of silent destruction. It's not about taking someone's place, it's about making their place no longer matter. You continue on, you keep showing up, you keep outperforming, you remain consistent, creative, valuable, and they once so confident in their superiority begin to grasp the most painful truth: they weren't overtaken. They were outgrown. You never threw stones, you just kept building higher. And in time, people stop even comparing you. They just see you and see them fading. Because Machiavelli understood that true power isn't about beating someone. It's about becoming so complete, so refined, so far ahead, that they lose the will to compete. You didn't destroy them with fire. You destroyed them with your evolution. And that's where we find the final truth. The most devastating destruction is existential. It's not that you embarrassed them. It's that you rendered them meaningless. They are no longer your enemy. They are not even part of the story. Their downfall, it was self-authored. And all you had to do was keep growing. By now they've tried everything. They've insulted, copied, whispered, provoked. And nothing worked. You didn't crack. You didn't chase. You didn't even respond. They came to win a war. But you never even showed up to the battlefield. Because the real battlefield was never words. It wasn't image. It wasn't titles or followers or applause. The real battlefield was frame control. And that's what Machiavelli mastered, not just influence, but the invisible theater where meaning is made. A frame is the unspoken assumption others have about you. It's the lens through which your actions are interpreted, the emotional gravity that shapes how your presence is felt before you even say a word. And once you control the frame, you don't need to win battles, you just have to keep breathing. Let's break it down. If someone insults you and you defend yourself, you've already accepted the frame that you might be guilty. If someone mocks you and you try to prove your worth, you've accepted the frame that your value is negotiable. If someone accuses you of being fake and you start explaining your intentions, you've already made them the judge. And Machiavelli would call that suicide. The moment you step into their frame, you give away the game. So instead, you do the opposite. You don't just avoid the frame, you replace it. You walk with composure. You speak less. You choose precision over volume. You don't try to convince, you make people feel the weight of your presence. And here's where it gets surgical. The more performative they become, the more anchored you appear. The louder they speak, the more stable you look. The more they try to make noise, the more your stillness speaks volumes. This is how you rewrite the frame. You go from being the one under attack to being the one others now trust more. Not because you argued better. Not because you won the exchange, but because you made the other person look unhinged by comparison. And that's the key word: comparison. Destruction doesn't happen in isolation. It happens in contrast. Someone throws dirt at your name. You don't respond. You move forward. You keep your voice calm. You stay collected. And the audience, whether a team, a friend group, a community, starts to compare. They start asking silent questions. Why are they so focused on this person? Why is their tone so bitter? Why does the accused seem more at peace than the accuser? And just like that, the story flips. You didn't attack them. You became a mirror, a reflection of everything they wish they could be, a contrast too sharp to ignore. But this isn't just about silence. There's one more layer. You make their attacks look forgettable. See, destruction without confrontation is a performance in minimalism. Every move you don't make is a message. Every topic you refuse to comment on, every name you stop mentioning, every invitation you decline, it builds something stronger than power. It builds distance. And nothing destroys the desperate more than distance. Because they crave relevance. They survive off attention. So when you don't give it, when your voice never says their name, when your face never turns toward their drama, their whole strategy collapses. But the real devastation, that comes when you start speaking about them in the past tense. Not maliciously, not bitterly, but with that soft tone people use when referencing something small, something resolved, something that no longer matters. Oh, I haven't heard from them in a while. I hope they're doing okay. Not sure what they're up to these days. Said without sarcasm, said like it's barely worth remembering. That's when they realize it's over. Because anger can keep someone in your story. But indifference writes them out of it. The final weapon is not silence, it's removal. Not the loud slamming of a door, but the quiet vanishing of an entire hallway. A complete erasure from the landscape of your life. No more mentions, no more rebuttals, no more presence. They simply stop being a factor, and in that void they crumble. Because the worst thing you can do to someone who tried to destroy you is not hate them. It's to become so complete, so transcendent, so untouchably you, that they realize they were just a lesson. A lesson that made you better. A lesson that clarified your values. A lesson that forced you to refine your energy. They don't get to be your rival. They don't get to be your villain. They don't even get to be a footnote. They are simply edited out. And this is where most people fail. They crave justice. They want closure. They want others to know what was done. But Machiavelli knew the moment you seek revenge, you admit you were hurt. The moment you argue for your reputation, you admit it was vulnerable. But if you say nothing, if you move like the wound never landed, if you build like the betrayal never slowed you down, then you don't just survive, you transcend. And when people look back, they won't remember the scandal. They won't remember the slander. They'll remember the silence, the grace, the precision, the absence of drama, and the presence of power. Because while your enemies screamed, you grew. While they plotted, you planned. While they dragged your name through the mud, you built something taller than they could reach. And by the time they look up hoping for a rematch, you're gone. You don't live in the same rooms anymore. You don't play the same games. You don't even speak the same language. They brought emotion. You brought elevation. They played status. You built legacy. They shouted your name. You built a world where that name is respected, trusted, and protected not by your words, but by your record. And records don't lie. By now, they've thrown everything they had. Insults, rumors, mockery, mimicry, silence breakers. They've tried to trigger you, trap you, bait you, replace you, smear you, imitate you, and none of it worked. Because you never played the game they designed. They assumed you'd react, that you'd strike back, that you'd defend yourself like everyone else, but instead, you took the air out of the room. You didn't fight fire. With fire, you built a world without oxygen for their flame to survive. That's Machiavellian. And the final movement, the most ruthless, the most elegant, is what breaks them completely. You disappear, not in shame, not in defeat, but in transcendence so clean, so complete. They begin to wonder if the war even happened. Because destruction without attack isn't about making your enemies lose. It's about making them irrelevant. Let's walk this final path. They expected a response, but you offered indifference. They tried to steal your narrative. You created a new one, and now they're stuck. Talking about you, thinking about you, trying to undo something that's already moved beyond their reach. And that's when you make your most devastating move. You exit their orbit. Not with a big speech, not with a tweet, not with a carefully worded statement, but with evolution. You stop showing up where they are. You stop replying. You stop leaving any trail they can follow. You move rooms. You elevate the level of people you speak with. You step into new opportunities that have no intersection with them. And now, the people you're aligned with, they've never even heard of your rival. That's what Machiavelli meant when he said true power doesn't need to shout. It simply needs to remain standing. You don't slam the door on them, you walk through one they don't even know exists. One they're not invited to. One they can't access. And it eats them alive. Because their plan was never to win. It was to pull you down. But now you're not even touchable. You're on a different frequency. They thought the game was status. You made it legacy. They thought it was about image. You made it impact. They tried to wound you with gossip, but the only thing bleeding now is their relevance. And everyone sees it. Not just because they're losing it, but because you didn't say a word. You didn't post about your growth. You didn't explain your peace. You didn't justify your path. You became your proof. And that's what people follow, not a rant, not a defense, but a presence. Because people know, even if they can't explain it. They feel it in your posture, in your choices, in your restraint. They start watching you closely but quietly. They don't comment, they don't share, but they notice. Something in you moves differently. You're not trying to impress anyone. You're not reacting to anything. You're simply aligned with your mission, your value, your future. And slowly you become magnetic. You don't chase approval. You attract respect. You don't demand loyalty. You inspire it. You don't need to dominate others. You just dominate your space so fully that no one can mistake who you are. And here's the final twist Machiavelli understood. Sometimes your enemies weren't there to defeat you, they were there to reveal you, to show you what you tolerate, to show you what you've outgrown, to force you to clarify your boundaries, your voice, your silence. Because without them, you might have stayed the same. You might have stayed smaller, you might have kept explaining, defending, apologizing. But now, you've let go of the need to be understood. You've let go of the urge to correct the record. You've let go of the instinct to fight for something that doesn't even belong in your future. And instead, you're building. Every day, with quiet fire, with intentional distance, with brutal clarity. You don't hate them, you don't fear them, you don't even think about them, because they no longer define the story you do. That's the Machiavellian crescendo. Not revenge, replacement. You don't destroy them with a blade. You destroy them with absence. You destroy them by making their presence forgettable. You destroy them by becoming so full, so sharp, so irreplaceable, that they collapse into the vacuum you left behind. And now, when their name is mentioned, people respond with, "Huh, I haven't heard that name in a while." And that's it. That's the death. Not physical, not reputational, but existential. They no longer live in the story. They no longer matter. And you didn't fight for that ending. You earned it. Because silence, when held by someone who knows their value, echoes longer than any speech. End of script. Have a beautiful day.